Most people think prison is just bars and cells, that it's about punishment, time served, lessons learned. But there's a world inside those walls they don't show you on TV. A world with its own rules, its own hierarchy, its own brutal logic. Secrets that only the people living inside understand. Codes that determine who survives and who breaks. Meet David Miller, 35 years old, college educated, middle-class background, no criminal record. Until one night, one decision, one mistake that cost him 5 years of his life. He thought he understood what prison would be like. He'd seen the movies, read the articles, heard the stories, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what he was about to experience. This is the story of what happens when an ordinary man enters a world designed to break people. The secrets he learned, the rules nobody told him, and the reality that changed everything he thought he knew about justice, punishment, and what it means to survive. The bus ride was the longest 2 hours of David's life. Shackled at the wrists and ankles, caged in a vehicle with 20 other men, most of them silent, staring at nothing. The windows were covered with metal grates. You could see out, but the world couldn't see in. David watched his city disappear in the distance. The buildings, the trees, the normal life he'd taken for granted. Every mile felt like a year being added to his sentence. When they finally arrived at intake, the reality hit him like a physical blow. Concrete walls 30 feet high, razor wire coiled at the top, glinting in the afternoon sun. Guard towers at each corner, officers watching with rifles. The sound of heavy gates sliding open, then slamming shut behind them. That sound, metal on metal, final and absolute, would haunt his dreams for years. Exit the vehicle, single file, no talking. They shuffled off the bus, chains rattling. David's legs were stiff, his mouth dry. He looked around at the other inmates. Some looked terrified like him. Others looked resigned, like they'd been here before. A few looked completely blank, like they'd shut down some part of themselves just to cope. Inside, the intake center smelled of disinfectant and fear. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Everything was the color of old concrete, gray, beige, institutional green. Strip everything. Put your belongings in the bin. David's hands shook as he removed his clothes, the last remnants of his civilian life. His watch, his wedding ring, the jeans and shirt he'd worn to court that morning. Everything that made him David Miller disappeared into a plastic bin with a number on it. They stood naked in a line. 20 men stripped of dignity along with their clothes. Guards walked down the line inspecting, looking for contraband, for tattoos, for signs of gang affiliation, treating them like livestock at an auction. Bend over, spread. The humiliation was designed, intentional. This was the first lesson. You are not a person anymore. You are a number, a problem to be managed, a body to be processed. David was given a prison uniform, orange, scratchy fabric that smelled like industrial laundry soap, shoes that didn't fit right, underwear that had been worn by God knows how many men before him. They fingerprinted him again, though he'd already been fingerprinted at booking, photographed him from 3 angles, assigned him a number, DOC 294857. Miller, David, cell block D, 5 years. You're in for what? Vehicular manslaughter, David said quietly. The intake officer didn't even look up. Great, another one. Move along. That was it. No orientation, no explanation, no handbook, just a number and a cell assignment. As they led him through the corridors to his cell block, David noticed everything. The way sound echoed off concrete. The smell, a mixture of industrial cleaner, sweat, food, and something else he couldn't identify but would later learn was just the smell of confinement itself. The clanging of doors, the shuffle of feet, the constant low hum of voices. They passed through several security checkpoints, each one with guards who barely acknowledged them, through gates that locked behind them with that terrible finality. Finally, they reached cell block D. The noise hit him first. Hundreds of voices echoing in a cavernous space. TVs blaring, someone yelling, someone laughing. The sound of weights clanging, footsteps on metal stairs. Cell block D was 4 tiers high. Metal walkways. Cells stacked on top of cells, stretching as far as he could see. Hundreds of men living in this vertical cage. As David walked past the cells, he felt eyes on him, sizing him up, calculating. Who was he? What was he in for? Was he weak? Dangerous? Connected? The guard stopped at cell 247. This is you. Bunk's already taken, so you get the top. The cell was 8 feet by 10 feet. 2 bunks, a toilet with no seat, a sink, a small metal shelf. That was it. This would be his home for the next 5 years. His cellmate was lying on the bottom bunk, reading a worn paperback. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and the lean, wiry build of someone who'd been inside for a long time. He glanced up at David, assessed him in 2 seconds, then went back to his book. Top bunk's yours, don't touch my stuff. Don't snore, we'll get along fine. The door clanged shut behind David, the lock engaged, and just like that, his old life was over. The first night, David didn't sleep. He lay on the top bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the prison at night, the constant shuffle of guards making rounds, the occasional shout, someone crying quietly, the hum of ventilation systems. The cell was never truly dark. Light from the corridor filtered in constantly, and it was never truly quiet. His cellmate, whose name he learned was Raymond, had been inside for 12 years. Armed robbery. He'd done time in 3 different facilities and knew the system inside and out. First piece of advice, Raymond said that first morning, not looking up from his breakfast. Keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. Learn the rhythms. Learn who's who. Don't ask questions. Don't volunteer information. Just observe. David took the advice seriously. Over the next few weeks, he watched everything. He learned that prison had its own intricate hierarchy. At the top were the lifers, men serving 20, 30 years, or life without parole. They'd been inside so long they'd become institutional. They knew every guard, every routine, every angle. They commanded respect because they had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from stability. Below them were the gang members, organized, connected, operating their own economies and enforcement systems. They controlled much of what happened inside: drugs, protection, trade, territory. Cross them, and you paid for it. Then there were the regular inmates like David, people serving mid-range sentences, trying to keep their heads down, do their time, get out. They were the majority, but also the most vulnerable, caught between the power structures above them and the chaos below. At the bottom were the outcasts, the sex offenders, the snitches, the weak. They lived in constant fear, isolated, preyed upon. David learned the daily routines. Wake up at 6 a.m. when the lights came on and the doors unlocked. Breakfast at 6:30 in the cafeteria, if you could call it that. Watery eggs, toast, coffee that tasted like dirty water. You had 15 minutes to eat, sitting at metal tables bolted to the floor, surrounded by hundreds of men all doing the same thing. Then came work assignments or programs. David was assigned to the kitchen, 4 hours a day of washing industrial dishes, mopping floors, serving food. The pay was 23 cents an hour, barely enough for basic toiletries from the commissary. Lunch, more recreation time in the yard if the weather was good. Dinner, then lockdown at 9 p.m., back in the cell for the night. 14 hours of nothing but 4 walls and whatever was going on in your head. But the real education happened in between the routines. David learned to read people, to notice the small signals that meant everything in here. The way someone held eye contact. Too long meant a challenge. Too short meant fear. The way people walked. Confident stride meant respect. Hunched shoulders meant vulnerability. The way conversation stopped when certain people entered a room. He learned about the economy. Everything had value inside. Cigarettes, even though they were banned. Stamps. Coffee. Ramen noodles from commissary. Phones calls. Information. Protection. Services. Men traded, bartered, owed favors, collected debts. He learned about contraband, how drugs made it inside, through corrupt guards, through visitors, through incredibly creative smuggling methods, how weapons were fashioned from anything, sharpened plastic, metal from beds, even hardened paper, how cell phones, the most valuable contraband of all, were hidden and shared. He learned the unspoken codes. Don't ask about someone's crime unless they volunteer it. Don't stare. Don't borrow without asking. Don't sit at someone else's table without permission. Pay your debts. Keep your word. Mind your business. Break these codes and you face consequences. Sometimes just social isolation, sometimes violence. David witnessed his first fight in week 3. 2 young inmates couldn't have been more than 25, going at each other in the rec yard over something trivial. A disrespectful comment, a perceived slight. It escalated in seconds. Fists flying, blood. Other inmates forming a circle, not to help but to watch. The guards responded with overwhelming force. Pepper spray, batons. Both men face down on the concrete, zip-tied, hauled off to solitary. The whole block punished with lockdown for 2 days. David learned that violence here was different than outside. It was sudden, brutal, and often over before you realized it had started. And the punishment for it was harsh. Segregation, loss of privileges, added time. But he also saw unexpected humanity. An older inmate teaching a younger one how to read. Men sharing commissary with cellmates who had no money. Quiet acts of kindness that went unnoticed by guards, but were everything to the people involved. Raymond, his cellmate, became a guide of sorts. Not quite a friend. Friendship was complicated in here. But someone who saw that David was trying to survive without becoming something he wasn't. "You're doing okay," Raymond said one night. "Most new guys come in here trying to be tough or trying to disappear. You're just being yourself. That's smart. People respect that more than posturing." "I don't feel smart. I feel terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you alert. It's when you stop being scared that you get sloppy." David also learned about the mental toll, the constant stress of being surrounded by hundreds of potentially violent men, the lack of privacy, the noise, the boredom punctuated by moments of terror. The way time moved differently, days dragging endlessly, but weeks and months somehow disappearing. He saw men break, saw them withdraw into themselves, stop talking, stop caring, saw them get into fights just to feel something, saw them give up. And he understood, for the first time, that prison wasn't just about physical confinement. It was about psychological warfare, about breaking your spirit until you either adapted or collapsed. He was determined not to collapse. 3 months into his sentence, David started to understand the deeper rules. The ones nobody explained, but everyone knew. The first rule, respect is currency. In prison, respect meant safety. It meant being left alone, or better yet, having people watch your back. You earned it by keeping your word, standing up for yourself when necessary, but not causing unnecessary problems and showing that you understood the code. David learned this when a younger inmate tried to take his dessert at dinner one night. Just reached over and grabbed it, testing him. Raymond watched to see what David would do. David's instinct was to let it go. It was just a cookie, not worth trouble. But Raymond leaned over and whispered, "You let that slide, everyone thinks you're weak. Next time it'll be something bigger." So David stood up, looked the kid in the eye and said calmly but firmly, "That's mine. Put it back." The kid sized him up, decided David wasn't worth the fight, put it back, walked away. A small moment, but everyone at the table saw it, and the message was clear. David would stand up for himself. The second rule, choose your battles. Not every disrespect required a response. Some things you let slide because escalating would cause more problems than it solved. The art was knowing which was which. David watched men throw away years of good behavior over petty slights. Watch them catch new charges for fights that started over nothing. Watch them add time to sentences that were already crushing them. He learned to let the small things go, to save his energy for what actually mattered. The third rule, guard your emotions. Showing fear made you a target. Showing anger made you unpredictable and dangerous. Guards watched you more closely. Other inmates either avoided you or tested you. Showing too much happiness made people think you had something they wanted. The safest emotion was calm neutrality, polite, reserved, unreadable. David became very good at this. He smiled when appropriate, kept conversations light, never revealed what he was really thinking or feeling. Inside, he was often terrified, lonely, angry, desperate. Outside, he was just David, doing his time, staying out of trouble. The fourth rule, information is power. Knowing things, who was connected to who, which guards were corrupt, where contraband came from, what was about to happen, could save your life or ruin it. David learned to listen more than he talked, to pay attention to patterns, to notice when tensions were rising before they exploded into violence. One time he overheard two gang members talking about a hit on a snitch. He didn't know who the target was, but he knew enough to stay in his cell during rec time that day. Sure enough, the violence happened. Someone got stabbed in the yard. Locked down for a week, Raymond noticed David had stayed in. "You heard something?" "I heard enough." Smart. That's how you survive. Know just enough to protect yourself, but not so much that people think you're involved. The fifth rule, the guards aren't your friends. Some guards were professional, some were sadistic, some were corrupt. None of them were on your side. They saw inmates as problems to manage, not people to help. Some enjoyed the power, would provoke confrontations just to exert control, would punish whole blocks for individual infractions, would turn a blind eye to violence they could have prevented. David learned to interact with guards minimally, answer questions respectfully, follow orders immediately, never complain, never ask for special treatment, because guards could make your life much worse if they wanted to. The sixth rule, everyone's got a story. David started really listening to the men around him, and he realized that almost everyone inside had a complicated path to this place. There was Marcus, 28, who'd gotten into a fight defending his little brother and accidentally killed someone. 10 years. There was Jerome, 42, who'd been caught with drugs he was selling to pay for his mother's medical bills. 15 years under mandatory minimums. There was Tommy, 56, who'd made one mistake at 18 and had been in and out of prison ever since because the system made it nearly impossible for felons to find legitimate work. There was Daniel, 31, who'd taken the fall for his girlfriend's crime because he thought chivalry mattered. 8 years. Some were guilty of terrible things. Some were victims of circumstance. Many were both. But all of them were human beings who'd made mistakes, who had families, who had dreams that had been deferred or destroyed. David started journaling at night, writing down what he observed, what he learned, what he felt. He wrote about how prison wasn't designed for rehabilitation. It was designed for punishment and warehousing. How it took men who'd made mistakes and turned them into harder, angrier versions of themselves. How it separated families, destroyed relationships, eliminated opportunities. How it disproportionately trapped poor people and people of color, while those with money and connections often avoided it entirely. How the system created cycles, men released without resources, unable to find jobs, returning to crime, coming back to prison over and over. He wrote about the waste, the human potential rotting in cells, the taxpayer money spent on incarceration instead of education or treatment or prevention. And he wrote about the humanity he witnessed despite everything, the resilience, the small kindnesses, the men who refused to let this place destroy their souls. In his second year, David was assigned to a different work detail, the library. It was considered a good assignment, quiet, less supervision, access to books. That's where he met William. William was 72 years old. He'd been in prison for 47 years. Life without parole for a murder he committed when he was 25. He'd spent nearly his entire adult life behind bars. But William wasn't broken. He was one of the most thoughtful, educated, peaceful men David had ever met. "How do you do it?" David asked him one day. "How do you survive this for decades?" William looked up from the book he was cataloging. "You find purpose, you help people, you learn things, you grow. You become better than you were, even if the world never sees it. But don't you feel like you've wasted your life?" "I wasted my youth. I took a life and destroyed families, including my own. That's my burden. But the years since, I've tried to make them count. I've gotten my GED, then an associate's degree through correspondence. I've mentored hundreds of young men, helped them avoid the mistakes I made. I've read thousands of books. I've become someone I can live with. William paused, looked directly at David. Prison is what you make of it. It can destroy you or it can transform you. But that choice, that's yours, not theirs. That conversation shifted something in David. He started seeking out the stories, really listening to people. He met Carlos, a father of 3 who'd been caught in a drug sweep. He hadn't been a dealer, just a user, but the mandatory minimum gave him 12 years. His kids were growing up without him. His wife had divorced him. He wrote letters every week that mostly went unanswered. I made mistakes, Carlos said, but the punishment? It's destroying more than just me. My kids don't have a father. My ex is struggling alone. The state is spending $50,000 a year to keep me locked up when I should be working, paying child support, being there for my family. He met Jamal, 23, who'd gotten caught up in gang violence as a teenager. He'd been trying to get out, trying to go straight, but one night his old crew had come calling, and he'd made a choice he regretted every day. Now he had 15 years. I was a kid, Jamal said, a stupid kid trying to survive in a neighborhood where violence was normal. And yeah, I made bad choices, but 15 years? I'll be almost 40 when I get out. No education, no work history, a felony record. What chance do I have? David listened to dozens of these stories, each one a life reduced to a number in a sentence, each one a human being with regrets, with potential, with people who loved them. He also saw the institutional failures up close. He saw men with serious mental illness punished instead of treated, schizophrenics in solitary confinement, bipolar men denied medication, suicides that could have been prevented. He saw the inadequate health care, men waiting months to see a doctor, serious conditions ignored, pain managed with ibuprofen when real treatment was needed. He saw the lack of programming, hundreds of men sitting idle for years when they could have been learning trades, getting education, preparing for release. But budgets were cut, programs were eliminated, rehabilitation became an afterthought. He saw the violence that nobody stopped. Guards who watched inmates hurt each other and did nothing. Sexual assault that was ignored, extortion that was permitted. And he saw the toll on families. During visiting hours, he watched children see their fathers behind glass, watched wives trying to hold marriages together across impossible distance, watched elderly parents visiting sons who'd been inside longer than David had been alive. The collateral damage of incarceration extended far beyond the inmates themselves. One day, David's own daughter came to visit. She was 7 now. She'd been 5 when he went in. She barely remembered him outside of these visits. The plastic chairs, the vending machines, the 30 minutes they were allowed every 2 weeks. She was shy with him, called him David instead of Dad, drew him pictures but didn't know what to say, asked when he was coming home in a voice that broke his heart. His wife looked exhausted. She was working 2 jobs, raising their daughter alone, dealing with the stigma of having a husband in prison. Their marriage was barely surviving. I don't know how much longer I can do this, she said quietly. 5 years is a long time, David. Sophie needs her father. I need my husband. And you're just gone. He had no answer. No comfort to offer, just apologies that felt hollow. That night, back in his cell, David wept, quietly so Raymond wouldn't hear, but Raymond heard anyway. It's the hardest part, Raymond said in the darkness, knowing what you're missing, knowing the damage you're causing just by being here. How do you deal with it? You accept it. You can't change the past. You can only change what you do moving forward. When you get out, and you will get out, you'll have a chance to rebuild. Don't waste it carrying guilt so heavy it crushes you. David thought about William, about Carlos and Jamal, about all the men trying to survive this place with some part of themselves intact. And he made a decision. He would survive. He would learn. He would become better. And when he got out, he would tell people what he'd seen, what really happens inside. The human cost of mass incarceration. He started writing more seriously. Not just journaling, but essays, letters to legislators, accounts of what he witnessed, stories of the men he met. He didn't know if anyone would listen, but he had to try, because the world outside needed to understand. Prison wasn't just about punishment, it was about people, families, communities, futures. And the current system was failing everyone. The incarcerated, their families, society itself. Something had to change. David Miller walked out of prison on a Tuesday morning in September, exactly 5 years after he'd walked in. The release process was almost as dehumanizing as intake. Return your uniform, collect your property, sign papers, get handed a bus ticket and $200 in gate money, and then you're just out. He stood outside the gates, wearing the same clothes he'd worn to court 5 years earlier. They didn't fit right anymore. He'd lost weight, gained muscle, changed in ways that went far beyond the physical. The world looked different, sounded different. Even the air felt different, fresh in a way he'd forgotten air could be. His wife picked him up. They drove in silence. Sophie, now 12, sat in the back seat, looking at her phone, occasionally glancing at him like he was a stranger, because in many ways he was. The first weeks of freedom were disorienting. Everything moved too fast. There were too many choices, too much noise, too much space. David had nightmares about being back inside, would wake up in panic, thinking he'd missed count, that he was in trouble. His wife would find him standing at the window in the middle of the night, just staring out, as if he couldn't quite believe he was allowed to look outside without bars in the way. Re-entry was harder than he'd expected. Finding a job with a felony record was nearly impossible. Most employers wouldn't even interview him once they saw the conviction. The ones who did offered minimum wage for grueling work. Rebuilding his relationship with Sophie was slow and painful. She didn't trust him. Why would she? He'd been absent for 5 critical years of her life. He was more like a stranger playing the role of father than an actual dad. His marriage was strained. His wife had learned to live without him, had built a life that didn't include him. Adding him back in was complicated, awkward, sometimes resentful. But David was different now. Prison had changed him in ways he was still discovering. He'd learned patience, learned to control his emotions, learned to appreciate small things, a good meal, privacy, the ability to make choices. He learned about systemic injustice in ways no classroom could have taught him, about poverty and race in the ways the criminal justice system perpetuated inequality. He'd learned about human resilience, about how people could endure unimaginable hardship and still maintain their humanity. And he'd learned that punishment alone doesn't create change, that prisons as they currently exist don't rehabilitate. They warehouse, they brutalize, they create cycles of trauma and recidivism that serve no one. David started speaking about his experience, first to small groups, community organizations, college classes, advocacy groups, then to larger audiences. He wrote about what he'd witnessed inside, testified before legislative committees about prison reform. He talked about William, 72 years old, who transformed himself but would die inside because the system had no mechanism for redemption. He talked about Jamal, who needed education and opportunity, not 15 years in a cage. He talked about Carlos and the children growing up without fathers, about the mental illness left untreated, about the violence that could be prevented, about the billions spent on incarceration that could be spent on education, treatment, prevention. Some people listened, many didn't. The system was massive, entrenched, profitable for some. Change was slow, but David kept speaking, kept writing, kept telling the stories of the men still inside. Because he'd learned the most important secret of all, that the people in prison are still people, that most of them will eventually return to society, and that how we treat them, whether we break them or help them heal, determines what kind of society we all live in. Prison is designed to be invisible. We lock people away and forget about them, out of sight, out of mind. But what if we couldn't forget? What if everyone understood what David learned? That prison isn't just punishment, it's a human catastrophe that affects millions of people, most of whom will eventually be our neighbors again. What if those who made the laws actually saw the impact of those laws? If prosecutors spent time inside the prisons they fill? If judges witnessed the long-term consequences of the sentences they impose? Would the system look different? Would we still have mandatory minimums that remove discretion and humanity from justice? Would we still incarcerate people for addiction instead of treating them? Would we still spend more on prisons than on schools? David's 5 years taught him something that society seems to have forgotten. Punishment alone doesn't create safety or justice. Healing does. Education does. Opportunity does. The real question isn't whether people deserve punishment for their mistakes. The question is, what kind of society do we want to be? One that breaks people, or one that helps them become better? Think about it. Thank you for listening to David's story. If it changed how you think about prison, about punishment, about the people behind those walls, then it's served its purpose. What's your perspective? Should our justice system focus more on rehabilitation than punishment? What would real reform look like? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. If you want more stories that reveal uncomfortable truths about the world we live in, subscribe to True Stories That Change Lives. Real experiences, real insights, real change. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, the people we lock away are still human beings, and they're coming back. How we treat them determines what they become.